TESHUVA, the one who decided to change his world, take 180 degrees and switch the direction that he grew up. He finally decided that the Western world has gone bankrupt. It's not worth it for me to be able to stay just because I was raised per se in a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that is the emet, that's the truth. And he decided to run and go a different direction to try to make himself frrom as possible, to be able to be oved Hashem, to be able to do as much as possible. But then sometimes after, could be half a year, sometimes 2 years, suddenly he starts having quivering feet. You know what happens? He hears one of those old songs from the past that he was also familiar with, his favorite song, the one that he also connected, of course, a Goyish song, or he sees a certain player or a certain actor that he was also connected to, that he used to enjoy watching, or suddenly he hears about a certain sports team that they won the pennant, and suddenly he's so excited, he feels a feeling of excitement about the event that happens, or some other type of events that happened in the past, or old friends from the blast from the past, etc., etc., etc. Some things that I assume that many of us can feel, and suddenly it brings him back to those old memories. It brings him out to a place that he wasn't there for a number of years. It brings him back to a place of hitchadshut, of something that he didn't know, and suddenly he starts going into, as they say, mechalchel betoch mocho. It starts simmering inside of his mind that maybe something's wrong with me. Maybe I really am not a Baal Tshuva. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm really not the person that I make up. Maybe I'm just a faker. Maybe I'm just pretending. Maybe I'm just playing a part. I'm just dressing a role. Maybe I'm just acting in a certain way. But he can't pull out of him what we call the Girsa Yanukta, that old past that came. Girsa Yanukta means it happened from his youth. Because as we all know, that experiences that we have from our youth are oh so connected to us. They're so dear to us. They're things that are very hard to remove from us, so to speak. And suddenly we feel that maybe that's just who I am and there's no change. So I want to quote to you something in the Sefer Ledat Eretz Darchecha that he spoke to Rav Wolbe a number of times about this subject. And Rav Wolbe used to say these words, Et ha'avar i'efshar limchok legamrei mi'azikaron. Don't ever think that you're going to erase the past legamrei, completely. You can't erase the past. It's a part of your kishkas. It's part of yourself. Things that are memories from our past are there with us forever. You remember those commercials much better than you remember the Shabbos mirrors that you're learning about right now. It's something that's just something that's part of a normal tahalich of being a Baal Tshuva. It's okay. There's nothing to feel guilty about. You don't have to start feeling mebulbal, confused, unsure, with quivering feet to think maybe there's something wrong with me, maybe I'm different, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. It's a mistake. That's not the action. That's not the truth. It's a normal mahalach that is meant to happen. It happens to everyone. It's supposed to happen. It might not be so easy. We had experiences in the past. There were experiences that weren't just external experiences. They're ones that we lived. We all know when we were teenagers that life seemed like that was it. I just remember recently walking, I was up north, and you see a bunch of teenagers up walking down a boardwalk, and they're all laughing with each other and all having a good time, and just asking my wife and going, you remember when we were that age? Like, you just think like the whole world is you. There is no other world except for me. Those friends that's it. That's everything there is in life. The fight that you got with that person, or the fallout that you had with him, or the good pal that you have over here, or the groups and the cliques that you have one with the other. This is it. This is the whole entire universe. Everything boils down to who you are and all about myself and all our experiences. And then suddenly something funny happens. You grow up, and it's not very long, it's a few years, and suddenly those 4, 5, 6 years seem like they were a lifetime. But suddenly you left that world and you realize, you know what, it's just something that everybody goes through. But it's something that we call a chavaya. It's a personal experience. It's an experience which you live through. It's something that's real. It's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, which we're reading during this time period. Says Rav Elisha ben Avuya, this is the only one statement that we have from Acher himself. Acher Elisha ben Avuya is the one who went off the derech, and it's not coincidental that he's the one who said, Haloi med yeled, what a person learns is domeh l'dioi ktuva al niyar chadash. It is similar to something that's written on a brand new paper. As the Tanura writes over there, hu mitkayem, it lasts forever. The girsa de yaldut eina mishtakachet. Your remembrances, your memories from the past are there forever. It's not just a naked memory. It's not just something abstract. It's not something external. It's something that you live by. It's something something that's there in your head. And it comes from there. So yes, it comes. And it's not a coincidence that Acher was the one who said this statement, because this TESHUVA writes in Chagiga, the reason why he ended up going to what he was is the famous Meiser with the Brit, at his Brit Milah, where the father said he's going to let him go learn Torah because he realizes you can do fancy things with it. Like they were burning fires, and he realized, wow, these Talmidei Chacham can do interesting things. There was no L'Shem Shamayim there, and it ended up going into the kid, and he was raised in a certain way that was Shaloi L'Shem Shamayim, and that stayed with him, and he ended up not being able to alter. Yes, that is what we experienced. The advertisements, the old cliches, the melodies, the successes, the trophies, all these types of things that we had in the past, it's still a part of us. And I'm going to explain how to get rid of it. But Al Kopanim, it's still a part of us, and there's nothing to worry when we feel that it was there. Everybody knows the famous Maisa with Rav Scheinberg, the very famous Maisa, that when he was in a cab, and he was in a taxi cab, and as he was going, the radio was on, and he heard that the Dodgers won the pennant. And he actually said he got a breath of Hana. Now, Rav Scheinberg was an unbelievable masmid. He was Yom and Valayla. Literally, he lived to 102 years old, and he learned 20 hours a day. He was a kanai, as they said, for hasmada, for being a masmid. The incredible feats that he reached in his learning Torah, also in Iman and also in Bekiyas, is unbeknownst to many people. And here it is, because he grew up until the age of 13 in a modern Orthodox type of world, so he knew about the Dodgers. Of course, he's the fake Dodgers, not from Los Angeles, that's the real Dodgers. He was talking about the Brooklyn Dodgers, but Al Kopanim, that's what he experienced at the time. And it says that Rav Scheinberg actually had a breath of enjoyment when he heard that happen. That's A. B. Rav Uri Zohar also. He one time reported, and I heard him say this, that he was one time on a plane, and in the olden days, you had no option but to see a screen in front of you when there was a certain movie that was running. Now, Rav Uri Zohar's greatness until the age of 40 years old, mamash like Rebbe Akiva, was his power of theater. He played in theaters, he directed movies, and he wrote them. His power was the power of the cinema. And when he would see, so to speak, he would kind of give a passing glance or look at the movie that was ahead of him, that was in front of him, he would be so annoyed about it. He said, stop the scene, cut, it's too long. He had it in his kishkas. This is a man who was already learning 30, 40 years. He was completely submersed in his learning, and he still had somehow a connection to the cinema, to the power of the movie. It still was in his vibes. It was still within. It was in his nervous system. It was still within there to be able to have it. That's right. So like we said, it's okay when these types of things pass through the Baal Tshuva. When it comes in, it's not something to be worried about. It's not a reason to put it in the past, to drop out, to be able to say that I'm a failure, because chas v'shalom, difficulties, challenges all happen to all of us, and that's the way it's supposed to happen. And the answer is why. And the question is why, and this is what we have to ask right now. Why does it happen in such a phenomenon? And here it is, a person, he made the 180 degree, he knows sichli, intelligently, emotionally, he knows 100%, this is the right decision. He knows that the Kadosh Baruch Hu's emet, v'torato emet. He realizes that the modern world, the Western world, is completely bankrupt. It's going nowhere besides the anti-Semitism, but the actual everything with the LGBT, and I always run out of all the letters they keep being mechadesh all the time. Everything that's happening is completely getting lost, and he has no problem with running away from the empty entertainment that is being surrounded by them, as opposed to the great gedula of gadlut, of intelligence that we're surrounded by. So why is it that he comes back to that Yaldut, to that place where he was before? The answer is that we are not robots, we're not machines. Okay, we might be a little bit artificial intelligence, some of us. We're already getting close to artificial AI, to people are getting close and close, but we're not things that happen with just one push, and we program push of a button, and voila, we're reprogramming myself, and that's the way it is. It doesn't work like that. You can work that way on a computer, but it doesn't work that way on a person. A person is built up of many traits, of many emotions, of many different types of natures, kochot, midot. He has different types of intrinsic capabilities, and midot, tavot, that we have within us. And therefore, when we make a change, it might work through the brain with the knowledge, but it also has to seep inside of us. Now, naturally speaking, when a person does something, we have to know we have an automatically a resistance to what we do. Any type of change that anybody ever wants to do requires an automatic resistance that happens to the person. It's something that's intrinsic within us. Your body, when they do an operation and they want to do some type of a kidney transplant, if a person needs it, or a blood transfusion, so we know that the body might spit it out, it might refuse it because the body has its immune system that is trying to keep away. So too in the emotional world, in the psychological world, that even though a person is trying to do a certain thing, is trying to make a change, the body has an action reaction and it'll spit out against it. It'll make it go in an opposite direction. Any person who ever had an addiction, of course, knows this. You can't just go up, stop cold turkey and say no more. It doesn't work. A person who had a drinking problem, a smoking problem, you can't just stop and say all of a sudden, okay, it's all over, I'm not going to do it anymore. The only way to do it is what we call a talich iti. It takes a step-by-step process. The reason why is because when a person does one step and another step and another step, so then the resistance, the immune system doesn't resist as strongly because you're doing a very small process. It doesn't go at a complete 180 against the system, and therefore it's okay, and therefore you're able to actually make the change until it becomes a part of your kishkas, a part of yourself. It becomes a part of the intrinsic part of the person himself that he's able to actually make that change. So this is the way it works. A person has, and he becomes a Baal Tshuva, hears an inspiring speech, goes to a seminar, or he finally realizes what's going on in the world outside, and he makes a whopper change, a 180, he has a full burst of inspiration. But that is somewhat external, it's somewhat not real. It's a burst of energy which lasts temporarily until you start going through the harder part of it. The process that takes a step-by-step process, where you have to go and slowly take it a little bit, step by step, yad by yad, a little bit, until you finally get to the destination that you want to get to. That's how it works. A person who's caught up in a storm, sometimes you see a burst of lightning. This is the words of the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim. A person sees a burst of lightning, and he uses that lightning, that ball of light, which he saw in the beginning, to be able to steer himself in the dark of the storm, to be able to get through those hard times which he's aiming to get to. And yes, that's why we find many Baal Tshuvas that fall to the wayside, because they start feeling, as we spoke out in the beginning of this year, this problem, that maybe I'm just a facade, maybe I'm a faker, maybe I'm just really just connected to my past, and just leave it alone. They might start making excuses about, is there really God or not a God? But al Kopanim, it doesn't come from a place of reality, because a person didn't put it as part of himself. A person has to put it into his kishkas, okay? You have to know and be able to know it until it becomes a part of yourself. And that's the way to be able to produce it, and of course that's the way it happens. This, in the Kabbalistic writings, is known as chesed, gvura, and tiferet. Of course, chesed is a ball and a burst of energy, an incredible burst of energy. Olam chesed yibaneh. The world was created, and I shouldn't use a slushon, but the Big Bang, a burst of unlimited amount of energy which came from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it would have just kept spreading forever. But if something keeps spreading infinitesimally, there's no room for producing something. You can't keep doing something forever. You have to stop. You have to put a gvul in it. You have to put a limitation. And that's the midah of gvura, of stopping. Hashem put a stop to the world, so now there's room for us to live. Shakai is shin daled yud, sha'amar le'olamoi dai. Hashem put a stop to it. So you have a burst of energy of chesed, but then of course you have to have gvura. Every man has to have a woman, because if not, he's just a burst of energy. They'll just keep doing things, but they won't have any kiyum to it, any sustenance. It won't sustain. He needs the woman to be able to take that and produce a baby from it. She's the one who's able to produce his capabilities and give it some power, to be able to put it somewhere, because you give perspective to all that chesed that's being produced. And then you finally reach Tiferet. You're able to reach the power of Tiferet. And this connects, and with this I conclude, to the idea, of course, of the Sfirot Omer. On Pesach, we had a burst of energy. It's the midah of Chesed, as the Torah writes. Pesach is Keneged Avram, Shavuot is Yitzchak, and Sukkot is Yaakov, Avinu. A person wants to start with that burst of energy that we have of Pesach, and that happened on the first night, the Seder night. Seder is the same letters of Pardes without the Pshat. Reish Daled Remez Drush Sod. It's the highest of the levels. We do 15 steps in a boom, in one big bang. It happens in one big spank, and it happens in a way that's fantastic. It's an aliyah. It's a beautiful night. It's something that we have special. The only time we're ever able to read Hallel at nighttime. But eventually you have to have that slow process of Sfirot Omer, day after painstaking day, where you make those counts one after the other. What's the month in the year which has the most holidays? You would have never guessed. Iyar. Iyar is the one that has. This month is the most holidays. Every day is a holiday. Sfirot Omer. You count the day, you count every day. It's a month that is jam-packed with every day of doing a Sfirot Omer, because you're giving sustenance to each day. You're building it slowly until you finally get to Shavuot. The name Shavuot means weeks, because it was built by our counting process of producing the weeks to finally to be able to get there. We're the ones who got there. We started with a boom of energy, and then we go through a difficult 49 days of counting, changing one meter, another meter, the 48 ways, of course, that we accomplish of learning, of being able to change who we are. And by that we finally get to the final destination, of course, that we call Shvuot. The month of Nisan is the Tleh, it's a sheep, which is one that follows the shepherd. He's the one that follows. That's the idea of Chesed. The month of Iyar is the shore. He's an intrinsic power. Gvura, he's the one of strength. The one is that. And the month of Sivan is the Te'umim, is the twins. Because we finally get to Tiferet. After you have Chesed, after you have Gvura, Tiferet, it doesn't ever get away. Nothing comes with one inspiring speech and Zehu. You have to have follow-up. You have to be able to continue. To be able to get finally to those 50 levels of Tahara. It's called Lev Tov. Lev Tov is a good heart. Lev Tov in Pirkei Avot, which we just read in Perek Bet, is the best, being a Lev Tov. What's Lev Tov? 32 is Lev. That's the first till Lag BaOmer, is the first 32 days. Lev Tov. And Tov is the last 17 days, which add up to the 49. Lev Tov is 49 with 2 breaks, with the Lag BaOmer in the middle. The Lev, and then you have the Tov that happens afterwards. That's why these are called the days of Matmonim, of jewels. Mem Tet Monim. 49, counting. Monim means to count, and Mem Tet is 49. We count the 49. The Matmonim, this is the jewels. This is the time to take advantage of a beautiful time of being able to slowly rebuild ourselves. Just like that Baal Tshuva was able to get himself out of the difficult times, and he was finally able to get himself to a place where he wanted to be. I'll end with a story that I heard in Arachim, that they had a person that whenever they do their Chazara B'Tshuvas, with their speeches, they always do a follow-up. And a follow-up that they do, they actually have a shir with a Gemara class of a certain, of being able to get to a certain place. They do follow-up, because it's not enough just to go to a seminar, like we said. So they were having one of these Gemara shirs, and there was a person that was sitting in the class of this person. He was sitting in the class of this Gemara class. They were learning Bab Metzia. They tried to take an easy Gemara. People were just starting out. And he looked like he just fell from India, out of the middle of nowhere, in his parachute pants. He said that he had tattoos from top to bottom from every type of animal under the sun. Mom was like an Indian. And he had a hair that made him have trouble walking in through the doorway. It had the size of an afro, which was so large that he barely couldn't believe that, what was hiding inside of there. The amount of hair that was there. And he was sitting there, and in the middle of the shir, so he started asking questions. The rabbi asked a question, and the person answered it. And then he himself asked a question, and that was Tosfot's question. The guy couldn't believe it. He said, wow, very impressive, very impressive. And then he noticed in the middle of the shir that the person stuck his thumb and went like this. In the middle of the shir, he went like this. He goes, I got you. You used to be charei, you used to be religious. I know you were. No one just does this with the thumb. And obviously, you have some type of background that came from there. And he goes, okay, I admit it, yes, he did come from a frrom family. And he went off the derech. He came from a frrom family. He ran away to India, and he went over there to learn every type of avodah zara, every type of idolatry, and everything else underneath the sun. But slowly he came back to Judaism. Now he's coming back, and he saw the Arachim, and he started coming back. So he said, after knowing everything you know, what do you want to start working on Shabbat? He spoke to him, he goes, no, Shabbat I can't keep. He said, why can't you keep Shabbat? He told him, because listen, I smoke like a chimney. I smoke like at least 2 packs a day. It's not happening. I'm not stopping on Shabbat. It's not happening. So the person was stuck. Came another one who works in the Mossad, who works over there also, and he told him, listen to me, you could smoke on Shabbat. It's fine. Just, you need to smoke, but you don't need to extinguish the cigarette. Just every time you want to extinguish a cigarette, don't. Just put it down and don't pull it out. Don't extinguish it and type it inside of the ashtray. Just put it down and let it extinguish itself. That much you can control. The guy goes, what am I, a friar? What do you think, I'm an idiot? I know that every time I smoke a puff, it's another isser. Every time I light the flame, it's another isur on Shabbat. And that's not true. So what big deal? Just because I extinguish it, so I'm avoiding the isser of extinguishing, is it such a big deal? That was the ta'ana of this person. He said, they tried to argue with him. They said, if you tell me someone big that tells me this psak, then I'm willing to do it. They went to no other than Rav Chaim Kanievsky. They went to Rav Chaim Kanievsky, and they were able to get a special protexia to get him in, and they got this guy into Rav Chaim Kanievsky. Rav Chaim Kanievsky, who tells people to take off their watches, this guy walked into Rav Chaim Kanievsky. Anyways, he was standing there, and they told him the story. They gave him a paper before it to give him a background about the whole story over there. And they told him that we feel that this is what he should do about the cigarettes. So Rav Chaim Kanievsky said, Batuach, yes, that definitely should be what he should do. He should go ahead, and every time he does it, and he said, just have in mind that one day I'll be able to do a little bit more Shabbat, but right now this is sufficient for me. And he ended up not to do that thing. Rav Chaim Kanievsky said, okay, that's definitely what it is, and he was willing to come and kabel. He said he was about to walk out, and Rav Chaim Kanievsky also told him, and by the way, get a haircut. You look like a tum-tum. That's what he said. He told him, he said, you go get a haircut like that. He said, okay. He was makabel the words of the Rabbi. He knew who Rav Chaim Kanievsky was. It was a great connection to be able to get there. And he said he kept smoking, but he put it out. And he said eventually he ended up keeping Shabbat just because of that. And he said, why? Because every time he didn't extinguish the cigarette, he remembered today's Shabbat. It reminded him today's Shabbat. That's all it did, even though he wasn't necessarily keeping Shabbat. He was still smoking cigarettes. But just the actual reminder slowly infiltrated into his body. He slowly learned to remind himself that, yes, this is something that's part of me, and there is a Shabbat, and there's something that I'm connected to, and that itself was able to get into a much more deeper recess. And that's the way it has to be. We have to eventually get to it in a slow process, never give up. And yes, we all have that blast from the past, those memories that we cannot remove, and of course they're part of us. But even with that, we mimazegota, we mix it together with the positive memories that we have of our Torah, of our learning, and with that, Bezrat Hashem, we will be able to be Yaleh V'Yatzliach. Kol Tov.